Hey everybody. I hope you are able to navigate your Schoology folders okay today. And I'm excited for us to finally begin our math learning. So here we're going to be talking about adding integers using absolute value. Before we start though, I want you to take a look at these three problems that I have as the do now. And typically when we're in class, I give you a few minutes at the beginning of class to work on problems that connect to what we've been learning. So if you look here, we're adding these questions on the number line. So what I would like for you to do is on your own sheet of paper is to draw three number lines going from -10 to +10, and then modeling these addition problems on those number lines. So this is a good place for you to stop or pause the video and go ahead and work out the three do now questions. Typically in class, the next thing that I do is call on students to go over their answers. As that's not really a possibility for our at-home students, I'm just going to go over the answers one by one, modeling how we solve it. So we're going to start with -5 plus 11. When we model on the number line, we always begin with the first addend, and we go to that location on the number line starting at 0. So if I start at 0, I'm going to travel to -5 with my first arrow. My second arrow travels the number of spaces that the second addend tells me to go. So this tells me I need to go positive 11 spaces. But I'm not going to start at 0 because that's not where I am anymore. I've moved to -5. So now I have to travel 11 spaces to the right. And -5 plus 11 will lead me to get positive 6. Next we have 8 plus -5. So here I'm going to go in the direction and location that for the first arrow that the first addend tells me to go. I need to go positive 8 spaces from 0. So here's my positive 8 spaces. Then my second addend tells me I need to go -5 spaces. So I'm going to start the arrow above the positive 8, and I'm going to go -5 spaces, which means I'm going 5 spaces to the left, which makes my answer positive 3. The next question then says 3 plus -12. So again, I'm going to start with my first addend going positive 3 spaces from 0. Then my second addend says I need to go -12 spaces, which means I start at 3 and I go -12 spaces. So I travel 12 spaces to the left, which puts me at -9. Great. If you have questions here, you will see me on Monday and we'll review this again on Monday. Or you can shoot me an email and I will get back to you. The other thing that we have yet to experience in class is me announcing our daily objective. And our daily objective is what we're going to be able to accomplish by the end of the day. And I use an acronym. I guess it's an acronym even though it doesn't make a word. And it's SWBAT. And that stands for Students Will Be Able To. My promise to you is by the end of this lesson, you're going to be able to do whatever it is we're talking about. So here, we're going to be able to add integers using absolute value. We probably need to review what absolute value is. So in your notes, you should be writing the SWBAT for today, and we're going to review the vocab. So absolute value, and I'm just going to abbreviate it here, is the distance of a number from 0. So you remember, absolute value is always positive because distance is always positive. I never run -4 miles, right? I'm always running 4 miles or traveling 18 kilometers or whatever. So distance will always be positive. So if I'm talking about the absolute value of -5, I could draw that on a number line. Right? And I could count the spaces, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I know it's 5. I also know that the absolute value of -5 is 5, just because we practice those problems over and over and over again, right? And we see that the absolute value of any number is the positive version of itself, because distance is always positive. So now we're going to move into how we add integers using their absolute value. Because let's face it, drawing a number line for every problem is not sustainable. If we have problems like the third one we see here, right, you can't draw a number line in the amount of time that we have for math class and get the right answer. So instead, we're going to use specific steps when we're adding integers with the same or different signs. So here we're going to start with the same signs. So in your notes, okay, the first thing that we're going to do, we're going to write down the steps of adding integers with the same signs. Okay? So the first step is find the absolute value of the addends. So now next to that step, go ahead and write -1 plus -3. Now if I'm finding the absolute value of those addends, the absolute value of -1 is 1, and the absolute value of -3 is 3. Next, because they're the same signs, the next thing I'm going to do is add the absolute values. So I'm going to add 1 plus 3, and that equals 4. Then the last step here is that I'm going to keep the sign of the addends. So I have -1 and -3, so my answer here is -4. Go ahead and write down this next example, -2 plus -4. And we're going to work through these examples. Okay. So I'm going to find the absolute value of -2 and the absolute value of -4. That's 2 and 4. Then I'm going to add the absolute values. 2 plus 4 is 6. And then I'm going to keep the sign of the addends. The addends are negative and negative, so my answer is -6. Okay, so let's take a second and let's try this last one. Go ahead and write down -34 plus -28. I'm going to do the same steps again. I'm going to find the absolute value of -34 and of -28. Then I'm going to add those absolute values, and I get 62. Because both addends are negative, that means I keep the negative sign, and my answer here is -62. You're going to have the opportunity to practice these in just a few seconds. All right, so now what happens if we have different signs? What happens if I am not adding a negative and a negative, but I'm adding a negative and a positive? Well, we start the same way. We still need to find the absolute value. So we find the absolute value of both of our addends. So the absolute value of -8 and +10 are 8 and 10. But here's the problem. We don't have the same sign, so we can't do the same thing that we did in the last examples. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to subtract the lesser value. And that means that we're going to have to reorder this guy. We're going to have to say 10 minus 8. We know 10 minus 8 is 2. Then the last step is we're going to keep the sign of the addend with the greater absolute value. So I need to look at my absolute values, 8 and 10, and decide which one is larger. Well, that's 10, and my original addend, 10, is positive. So my answer to -8 plus 10 is positive 2. Let's do another example. We have 23 plus -31. Go ahead and write this guy down. So -23 plus -31, I take the absolute value of 23 and the absolute value of -31. The absolute value of 23 is 23. The absolute value of -31 is 31. I subtract the lesser value, so I have 31 minus 23. (31 minus 23 is 8. So then I keep the sign of the addend with the greater absolute value. Well, the one with the greater absolute value is 31, and its original form, it's negative. So the answer to 23 plus -31 is -8. Okay, so now, again, in normal circumstances, we would work together to find the answers here. But we're not in normal circumstances. So the video is about to pause and give you time to answer these questions. After you answer the questions, I'll come back on and explain how we find our answers. To -4 and plus -5, these are the same signs. So I'm going to take the absolute value of -4 and the absolute value of -5. 4 and 5, they're the same sign, so I add them, and I get 9. So the answer here, because it's the same sign, I keep the negative, is -9. -11 plus -3 are the same signs again, so I'm going to do the following steps. Find the absolute value of -11 and -3, which is 11 and 3. I'm going to add them because they're the same signs and get 14. Because they're the same signs, I'm going to keep the sign in the rest of the problem, so my answer is -14. Now I have -15 plus 9. Now I have different signs. I have a negative and a positive. I'm still going to start by finding the absolute value of -15 and +9. -15, the absolute value is 15. 9 is 9. I'm going to subtract the lesser value. And lucky for us, it's already in the right order, 15 minus 9. We know that 15 minus 9 is 6. And then I look at which number has the higher absolute value. Well, that's -15. So my answer is -6. And finally, I'm going to take the absolute value of -14, the absolute value of 8. So I have 14 and 8. They're different signs, so I have to subtract them. 14 minus 8 is 6. -14 is the higher absolute value, so my answer is -6 again. So your activity today is an exit ticket. and it's in your folder, and it's just 4 questions long. For now, all you have to do is submit your answers. Remember, we've had this discussion about calculators, and although I can't tell whether or not you show your work for this assignment, I'm hoping that you choose to work through the steps, write them out in your notes, and then put your answers in Schoology. Remember that if you choose to just plug these things in the calculator, you're not preparing yourself for the algebra portion of 7th grade math or pre-algebra. So when you do that, when we get to the place where we have to simplify an expression like negative 2xy plus xy, we might not know what steps to take because we can't put x and y in the calculator. So please work these answers out and submit them in your exit ticket assignment in your folder for today. I hope everybody has a great weekend.